Dave told me is a very significant day. So,
Well, yeah, stop saying Kaddish.
so tomorrow you start. So tomorrow you're still saying, or
My
today?
last Kaddish is Mincha.
Today mincha or tomorrow mincha?
Tomorrow Mincha.
Okay. So today is also a very interesting. A lot of interesting things happened today. A lot of very interesting happened. Let me see if I can read this without my glasses. One of the things that happened today. Today is the yahrzeit of the Rosh, the Rishon the Rosh. But another thing, maybe David can shed some light on it. There's two reasons why Tes Cheshvan was celebrated as a Yom Tov. One is in the time of the second, a year and a half before Churban Bayis Sheni, the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, the Jews totally destroyed a major legion of the Roman army and chased them out. So that was a little bit of a Yom Tov. It's also a Yom Tov because the Rambam celebrated Tes Cheshvan as a Yom Tov because it's the day they left Yerushalayim to go daven at the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And he declared the day a Yom Tov for his family and made a Sudas Hadah, that he was Zoichet to go to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. What is very interesting is both in the year 1327, in the year 1759, and in the year 1867, in all those 3 years, there was a major earthquake in Sfat that caused a lot of damage. So the 9th of Cheshvan is a day of earthquakes. I'm not sure. I would reach out to David to ask you if you know anything that would link the 9th of Cheshvan to the day of earthquakes.
Not really. Maybe it's called Mar Cheshvan, but I don't know why you made a Yom Tov on Mar on.
I have a little bit of an issue. One second, my laptop is not shooting for some reason. I got to plug it into it. I'm not sure why. Okay, it says that my battery is running low, but but it's plugged in, so I'm not sure why it's not working. I don't want to go dead. Okay. I'm not sure. Well, my adapter is not powering up. So it ain't working. It's plugged in. Plug works. So that's plugged in because the router still works. Yeah, the router's on. It's blue light. For some reason. No, I tried that. I didn't see that. It's still out there. Let me see if I can plug it underneath the other one. Take the wall.
Wow, that was a quick share.
Yeah, with earth shaking.
Oh, now we lost him completely. There goes his battery.
Yeah.
Maybe
So, do we have the 10-minute rule here?
Maybe he has his phone on him. Oh, he's back.
We lost power for a second. But we're back in business.
Oh, because it's the 9th of Cheshvan.
Oh, there goes our earthquake again. That's right. It's the Rosh's yahrzeit and it's a Shimon Shkop's yahrzeit. Those are the two yahrzeits. Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara. So we were talking about the different halachas that the elders of Pumbedisa, which was Rabbi Yehuda and the yeshiva, the different halachas that they said. And we're up to Omar Memar, second last line at the bottom of Ayin Testament base. Omar Memar. Ha Nami, the following halacha that I'm going to quote, Sabi the Pumbedisa Amrinu, the elders of Pumbedisa said as well. The Itmar, Ezehu Yashera Stam. How can you tell that something is an Ashera if you don't see people actively bowing down to this tree or serving this tree? What is a good litmus test for you to recognize if there is a tree that's an Asherah? Omar Rav said, Kol shemisharsei if there's a guard, if there's an honor guard watching the Asherah, that would indicate that it's Asr Bahana. So if you see that a tree that's being watched by the Goyim, you should know that it has the status of an Asherah and it's Asr Bahana. And therefore, since it's Asr Bahana, the Ein Tayamin Mepeir, you're not allowed to eat from its fruit. Shmuel Amar, even if they don't have a guard watch, but even if occasionally going to Amri, Hani Tamri, L'Shichra, Devei Nitzrafi, the Shashalavi and Chago, even if you just know that the Goyim say that the dates of this tree we save and we make beer out of them to drink on the Goyisha, on the Yom Tov of the Goyisha Avodah Zarah, that also would indicate that this tree is an Asherah. Omar Meimar.
Yosy, I hate to interrupt this. I've never seen this before. My Gemara in the bottom of the last line of Amud Beis says, Omar Rav Kol Shekimrim Shemrim Moisa. Is that a change in Girsa?
And by me, just Mashur say of Avodah Zarah.
I guess what Kaimrim is that? Is that a
means a priest?
Is that Kaimrim is priest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What Gemara do you have? There's sometimes the censor change things.
Yeah, it's the blue. It's similar, very similar to the blue one. It's just brown. The blue ones that they have in Beis Medrash.
Yeah.
The Freeman edition.
You mean the? Oh, I hear. It's very possible there's different Gersoyes due to the censor. I'm not sure if because of the censor they wrote Kaimrin, or if because of the censor they wrote Mishar.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
What's that? Carmen. Does he bring down like a note where that comes from? Very interesting. Ashkoich. Zog to Gemara weiter. V'amali sabi de pomadisa hilchasa kavasei de Shmuel. We pass like Shmuel, which is a chumrah, because Shmuel said even if they're not watching it, but you just know that they use its peiros to make beer for their day of Yom Tov, that's also going to render a tree asr bano. You wouldn't be able to enjoy its peiros. Meisrei to the Gemara. Ketad mishtatfin b'mavli. So in the Mishnah we said that when you have someone being zoicha in this barrel for everybody else in the mavli, they have to lift up the barrel one tefach. But the Brisa says, how do you do it? Mevin chavish shal yain v'shal sheven v'shal tmorim v'shal groigris v'shal shar b'nei peiros. Imi shaloi, if it belongs to the person who is making the Eruv, then tzarech liskos, he has to be koine in it on behalf of everybody else. V'mi shalahen, but if he has a barrel that already has a contribution, or that has peiros from everybody, they collected peiros from everybody. Tzarech lo'idiyah, he has to let them know that they're designating this as the Eruv. I'm not sure why they would have had everybody's peiros already, but let's say they had everybody's peiros. We're soon going to see that you're even allowed to take Baal Korchai. So maybe even if somebody went from everyone's farm and took peiros from them and then had it in the barrel, they'll have to inform the owner of those peiros. By the way, we have your peiros, we collected them, and we're using it for the purposes of making a shitufa mavuyos. And if you're going to be zoicha in something for them, umagbia min akarka mashu. So, Frank the Gemara, our Mishnah says it has to be a tefach. This Brisa says it only has to be a mashu. So, Gemara, my mashu nami dika amar tefach. A mashu means a tefach because for Kenyan purposes, for real Kenyan purposes, you would actually need to lift it up 3 tvachim. So, vibalt, this isn't really a real Kenyan, or it doesn't need to be a real Kenyan. It's just for the purposes of Eruvin. So, for the purposes of Eruvin to join our Rishuyos, the Rabban said it would be enough if you only lifted it up a tefach. Itmar. Shitufay mevuyos. Rav Amar ein tzarech liskos. You don't have to be koinit on behalf of everybody. Ushmuel Amar tzarech liskos. So right off the bat, our Mishnah says quite clearly, and the Brisa that we just learned says quite clearly, that you have to be zoicha in this barrel on behalf of everybody. So Rav is outright arguing on our Mishnah. And the Gemara is soon going to indicate that. But we know Rashi tells us Rav is a Tana, and he has the right to argue on the Mishnah. Eruv Tchumen. What about Eruv Tchumen? So you want to place Eruv Tchumen on behalf of some other people. Rav Amar Tzarech L'Skosh, you have to be koinit on behalf of the people that you're going to make the Eruv Tchumen for. Shmuel Amar Ein Tzarech L'Skosh. And Shmuel holds you don't need to. Now the question is, what's the difference, according to Rav, where you don't need to be koinit for the Eruv Chatzeris, but for the Eruv Tchumen, you do have to make a kinyan. So we have a beautiful Tosfos that actually gives us 3 reasons to explain this Gemara that we just learned. So let's do the Tosfos quickly. It's a simple Tosfos. Rav Amar Ein Tzarech L'Skosh. What's the svara? The kivan the Osir Alei. Since when it comes to Eruv Chatzeris, the fact that if we don't make an Eruv Chatzeris, nobody can carry. Everybody is terribly inconvenienced, myself included. So therefore, Gomar Umaknile, without officially being kind for somebody, there's such an inherent desire in every person to want to make this Eruv Chatzeris. I'm able to be makna them the barrel or a part of the barrel without even someone being koined on their behalf. So clearly this is not working with standard kinyonim, but it's all for the purpose of Eruvs. Again, since I want you to have a part of this barrel because I want to be able to carry it in the culture, that's good enough, and you don't need to have someone be koined from me on behalf of them. But by Tchumen, I would have to be koined, I would have to get somebody to be koined on behalf of the people who I want to include. Because they have no impact on me. I could walk my tchum wherever it is, and I can make my own tchum wherever it is. If you're limited to where you are, and you're not koine shvisa elsewhere, it doesn't impact me. So therefore, there's not such a desire for me to make you be koine. Which is what Rashi says in short. Shmuel says exactly the opposite. The mavoi tzarech l'skois by mavoi, I have to have some be koine the barrel on behalf of everybody. Because they actually have to have a kinyan on the rishus. They're being koine the rishus of the chutzner, because we're all unifying our property in this chutzner, so we can all carry there. Because over Erev Mishum Kinyan, we had a shiloh of Erev Mishum Shavus or Mishum Kinyan. Is it only about food, or does it have to be a Shava Pruta? So we hold, or Shmuel holds at least, it's Mishum Kinyan, so therefore a Kinyan is required. The Perk Mishum Atziu. Erev Mishum Dira, and if it's only Mishum Dira, you still need kinyan, a proper kinyan, so that you should be able to have property rights in your friend's house, which unifies everybody. But with Tchumen, Shavar Shmuel, where you don't need schus, the Eitzach Liskois, the Laikani Rishus Achermu. He's not being koina anyone else's Rishus. No one's being koina anything. It's merely a question of where Yener is going to be koina Shvisa. So therefore, no kinyan required. Inami, even the Ein Ma'arvin Ever Tchumen El Dvar Mitzvah, since like we learned a couple of days ago, we learned it a while ago, we reminded ourselves a couple of days ago, that Erev Tchumen is only made for the purposes of a mitzvah, Mishum Mitzvah Gomer Makni. So therefore, because of the desire to assist this person in doing the mitzvah, he's Gomer Makni, he doesn't need a special schiyah. V'oid, another svar is, Kivin the Erev Tchumen Ein Ma'arvin El Midaitai. The halach is, Erev Tchumen, you can't just be zoichin for somebody, because who says he wants to be kohen shvisa 2,000 amos in this direction? Maybe he wants to be kohen shvisa 2,000 amos in a different direction. So you always need confirmation from the person you're making the error for. Therefore, amirasoi kishu oimer tzei, when the person tells you, yes, I do want you to make the error for me 2,000 amos to the east, chashuva kischia, that is in place of the schia, and that's why Shmuel holds for Erev Tchumen you don't need schia. So those are the different svaras that Tosfos offers to explain why you should need schia by Erev Chatzeris, like you do according to Shmuel, or why you would need schia by Erev Tchumen, like you do according to Rav. So let's see what the Gemara says over here. Frek the Gemara. Bishlam Shmuel. Shmuel's sheet is very understandable, where you need kinyan for Erev Chatzeris and Shitufim Avuyos, and not for Erev Tchumen, because Hachatnan, our Mishnah here that discusses Erev Chatzeris says beferish, someone's got to be koine the barrel from you on behalf of everybody in the Chatzar. So Shmuel is very consistent with our Mishnah. And the Mishnah that talks about Erev Tchumen never says anything about a kinyan. El the Rav, my timer. According to Rav, why would he hold that you don't need Schia for Erev Chetzeres? And that the Gemara doesn't really address. It's Rav Tanahu Polik, and Tosfos gave us the reasoning. What the Gemara is going to address is why Rav holds that by Erev Tchumen you do need kinyan on behalf of everybody, on behalf of all the people who you're becoming shvisa for. So Gemara Tanoi, it's actually a machlokes Tanoi. The Amar Rabbi Rav, the reader told us the name of Rav. Ma'aseh b'chalosoi shel Reb Oishia, the daughter of Reb Oishia, shehalcha lebeis hamerchet. She went to the beis hamerchet, and the way Rashi learns that this beis hamerchet was out of the tchum, and she was there on Friday. V'choshchala, and Shabbos arrived, and she didn't make it back. So now she can't come home for Shabbos. She's stuck out the middle of nowhere in the beis hamerchet for Shabbos. Unbeknownst to her, the Eruv Chamoisa, her mother-in-law, made for her an Erev Tchumen so that she would be able to come back. So, for instance, let's say she was 3,000 amas. Let's say this Beis HaMechet was 3,000 amas from the city, so she's out of range. If you make an Erev Tchumen halfway between where the Beis HaMechet is and the city, now using the Erev Tchumen, she can come back to the city. And this Shaila was asked to Reb Chia. The Asar, he said, I'm sorry, that Erev was no good, and your daughter-in-law is going to be stuck in the Beis HaMechet for Shabbos. No, maybe the mother-in-law sent for the daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law maybe went to her and said, I want to call my daughter-in-law and tell her, I want to send out a shliach to my daughter-in-law and tell her, and how does the shliach go? That maybe she made him there for a shliach also. The practicality of it is, or she just WhatsApped her. The Asar, and he said, no, you're not allowed to. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy told Rabbi Chia, Bavloi, you people from Babel are very fanatic. Kol kach, ata machmir, the Eruvin, you're so far from when it comes to Eruvin. Kach Omer Abba. You know what Abba said? Kol sheyesh lech l'halkol b'Eruvin hakel. Verkehrt, whenever you have an opportunity to be mekel b'Eruvin, you should be mekel. Why are you looking for chumras? So the question is, why Taka did Reb Chia not allow the daughter-in-law of Reb Oishia to rely on this Erev Tchumen to come back for Shabbos? The Gemara had a shaila. Mishal Chamoisa Irvala, the mother-in-law used her own property, her own food, to make the Erev on behalf of her daughter-in-law. Umishum de la, and the reason why Reb Chia said this is not a good Erev is because she didn't have someone coin that food on behalf of her daughter-in-law before she placed it, and therefore it's not her daughter-in-law's food, and therefore it's not a good Erev. Or maybe she actually took food that belonged to her daughter-in-law. So the food that was placed for the Erev Tchumen was her daughter-in-law's food, but the reason why it didn't work was umishum de shaloi midaita, is because no one told her about it, and she didn't know about it. So someone answered, and Rabbi Yaakov was the one who answered, and he said as follows: I'm going to, I heard this. I heard pshat in this psak of Rabbi Chia from Rabbi Yochanan that Mishal Chamoisa Irva, the mother-in-law sponsored the food for the Erev Tchumen. So why wouldn't it be good? And the problem is not because she didn't know about it. That would be okay. But the problem is because she was never, no one was ever coining it on behalf of her daughter-in-law. That's why it's not a good Erev, which supports Rav Shita, because Rav held, like we said, that you need kinyan to come to Erev Tchumen. According to Shmuel, you wouldn't even need a kinyan. Omer le Rab Zeir le Rab Yaakov, Parei de Bas Yaakov. So Rab Zeir told Rab Yaakov, the son of the daughter of Yaakov. So there's a shaila here. Rashi, I believe, says that this Bas Yaakov married someone who wasn't appropriate, and his name was not worth mentioning. And that's why it says Parei de Bas Yaakov. Rashi says, so he wasn't zoicha that his name should be mentioned in the Gemara. There are others who said he was a good guy, but his wife overshadowed him. And this is what Reb Zeir told Reb Yaakov. Kimot is hasam. When you go up to Eretz Yisrael, I want you to do me a favor and go out of your way. Akif v'zil l'sul medatzur. I want you to go out of your way and go access through this area in Sur where you have to climb up high mountains. There was like a sharp incline pathways to go, and I want you to ask Uboy Minei Rabbi Yaakov Idi, and I want you to ask Rabbi Yaakov Idi what actually happened, because I want to get clarity in the situation as to what happened with the daughter-in-law of Rabbi Yosy. So Boy Minei, so he actually went out of his way. He made a detour to go to this place, and he asked, "Mishal chamoisa irva umishum delezichala, or dilma mishala irva umishum deshalom yidaita." Omer le Rabbi Yaakov Idi said, "Mishal chamoisa irva la." The food for the Eruv that was going to be used for Rabbi Yoshy's daughter-in-law was the mother-in-law's food. And since the mother-in-law didn't have a third party be kind of this food on behalf of her daughter-in-law before it was placed as the Eruv, that's why it's not a good Eruv. So again, this is the Rav Shita who holds that for Eruv Tchumen, you need the person who's going to benefit from the Eruv. You need that person to be kind. Amar Rav Nachman Paskins. Nakdinon we paskin halacha l'maisa echad eruv tchumen ve'echad eruv chetzeres ve'echad shituf mevuyos tzarich liskos. So we paskin l'chumra like Rav and l'chumra like Shmuel, meaning you always need kinyan. There's a svara that you can paskin like Bashamay we learned. You can paskin like Basil, but the paskin l'chumra on both sides that's not appropriate. So the Gemara, to the Rishonim answer, that's only when it's like a tar to the sasri, which we had in the Gemara before. But here it's individual halachas. So therefore, in each individual halacha, you can paskin l'chumra, and you could paskin that you need to be kind. And I think that's how we learn as well, that whoever is benefiting from an Eruv has to own it. So we've discussed 3 Eruvin, Chetzeres, Shutufim Mevuyos, and Tchumen. There's still one left. That's Eruv Tavshil. Yes, somebody could be kind for them, but it has to be done that way. So if I want to make an Eruv on your behalf, I can't just say, I'm a zakah to you. I have to get somebody. I say, Dovi, do me a favor, be kind of this barrel, or chelik in this barrel, on behalf of Mechi. So it has to have the structure of a normal kinyan. Boy Rav Nachman. So even though it has to be a real kinyan, it's not really a real kinyan, because the Mishnah says, even if you need a kinyan, the Hagbah doesn't have to be 3 tefachim like it would be required for a real kinyan. It only has to be 1 tefach. So this is all to meet the standards of what the Chacham required to make an Eruv, but it's all b'derban. So boy Rab Nachman, what about Eruv Tavshilin? Eruv Tavshilin Sharach Liskos or Ain't Sharach Liskos? Now, it's very interesting. When do you ever make an Eruv Tavshilin on behalf of somebody else? So I believe the Rav makes an Eruv Tavshilin on behalf of the city. And I think you have one time, if you forget once, you could rely on the Rav, but not the second time. So the Shiloh, does the Rav is making an Eruv Tavshilin on behalf of everybody? Does he have to get somebody else, like his wife, to say, to be koine the Eruv Tavshilin on behalf of everybody in the city, so that everybody could have it? Okay. So Amar Rabbi Yosef. Yeah, I think you could only rely on the Rav once in a lifetime. The second time, if you forget to make an Eruv, second time you can't. I don't know where it comes from. Yeah, there's no reset button. We're a new person with the tshuva. We should get a reset. I don't know. You could do tshuva on everything, but if you miss the Eruv, you cannot do. Yeah. I hear. It's a good question. But I remember once the Rav always announces in shul by Yom Tov, whoever didn't make an Eruv Tavshilin. So I once forgot to make an Eruv Tavshilin. After Mincha, the Rav announced, whoever didn't make an Eruv Tavshilin, make them now. So I ran into the kitchen. In those days, they still had food in the kitchen. And I grabbed 2 bilkis, and I grabbed whatever I saw in the kitchen, and I quickly made an Eruv Tavshilin. And I was koinit, I'll eat exela. You don't have to be in your house. So I made the Eruv Tavshilin here in the kitchen. If you didn't get a bilka, that's all should is because I took it.
Isn't there a whole Lulav Guzzle? There's a whole parak about you can't be Yosy with that.
Yeah, but because all you're doing with Eruv Tavshilin is you're showing that you started to cook already. Okay. So Zok Teila Gemara. When we're going to have a Yom Tov and Shul again, the Rav always discusses the reason how does Eruv Tavshilin works. There's actually machlokes in the Gemara. There are those who hold that you're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So if Friday is Yom Tov, you're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov. However, you're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Yom Tov. So I'm allowed to cook today, Friday, because maybe people will come visit me today, and I'll need food for them. So you're allowed to cook on Friday for Friday, as long as the food will be ready early enough that if Orchim came on Friday, you'd be able to feed it to them. And in addition to that, in order to make it look like you've already started cooking, you make an Erev Tavshilin, you make an Erev Tavshilin on top of that. But it's all based on Dumli Klal Orchim. Because of that, the Rav on Pesach always clears the Shaila that if Achron Shal Pesach is on a Sunday, and if the second last day of Pesach is on a Shabbos, no, if Achron Shal Pesach is on a Shabbos, if Achron Shal Pesach is on a Shabbos, and you're on Friday, and you're makbid on, you don't need kabrokst, are you allowed to make knedlich on Friday before Shabbos, because you don't have to serve Dumli Klei Orchim, because you can't eat it. Because you can't eat it. And you're not allowed to eat it. So either maybe you'll have Orchim, so there's different approaches. So there's one shot is maybe you'll have Orchim who do eat kabrokst, and you'll serve it to them. But the Rav always says over the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says it's such a mitzvah to eat knedlich on the last day of Pesach, because that brings achdus from Klal Yisrael, because it puts all the minhagim that separate us aside. We can all eat together when we mishchach on the last day. The Chassam Sofer says that you're even allowed to eat those knedlich on Friday, because it's muftach that it won't become chametz. So that's one of the Rav's favorite shtickl. He always says it when Nachman Shal Pesach is on Shabbos.
If the whole thing is based on Orchim, during Corona, the Rav doesn't allow Orchim.
Oh, so maybe then you wouldn't be able to make an Erev Tavshilin.
That's right.
That's a good order. We have to ask the Rav. During Corona, you're allowed to make an Erev Tavshilin. Huh? Maybe don't the guy. That's right. I hear it's a very good order. It's automatically flouting the rules. Okay. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Bar of Nachman, Erev Tavshilin. Tzarech liskos, ain't tzarech liskos. By an Erev Tavshilin, does the person need to be kind? Omer Yosef, umay teboyle. What's your question? Loy shami alei. Had Amar Rab Nachman by Rav Ada Amar Shmuel Erev Tavshilin Tzarech liskos. Why are you clearing? Don't you know that we have someone quoting in the name of Shmuel that you do need it? Amar lei Abaye. Shita deloy shmilei. It must be that he didn't hear it. In other words, Rab Nachman, who asked the Shaila, he could not have heard that Shmuel paskined that you need to be kind. The Shmilei, mighty boile, because had he heard that Shmuel has already paskined that an Erev Tavshilin you need to be kind, he wouldn't declare the Shaila. Amar lei. So Rabbi Yossi told him, no, lav davka. Atu Erev Tchumen, miloi Amar Shmuel ain't tzarech liskos. Amar iu tzarech liskos. You see, Rav Nachman argues on Shmuel when it comes to Erev Tchumen, because Shmuel said the Erev Tchumen, the person doesn't have to be kind, yet Rav Nachman didn't pass him like him. Rav Nachman passed him by Erev Tchumen, you have to be kind. So Gemara that you can't compare the two. Hachiyasha. Bishlam Mahasam, by Erev Tchumen, there's a machloikis between Shmuel and Rav. So it's conceivable that Rav Nachman will not pass him like Shmuel, he'll pass him like Rav. Hazan Pliki Rav Shmuel. The Kamash Malon, Chumran Damar, Chumran Damar. And therefore Rav Nachman paskin like the Chumra of Rav and the Chumra of Shmuel. And the Chumra of Rav is that you need a kinyan for Erev Tchumen. But the Shaila of Erev Tavshilin, there is no machlokes Rav and Shmuel. We only have Shmuel saying that you need to be kind of. So he said the Shmilei, Meika demand the Pollock. If Rav Nachman would have heard that Shmuel paskin that by Erev Tavshilin you need to be kind of, he couldn't have argued because there's nobody arguing on Shmuel. So therefore, it must be that Rav Nachman didn't know that Shmuel said it, because had he known Shmuel said Erev Tavshilin in Kinyan, he would have never had the Shaila. Who Terzina? Terzina was a guard. He was a security. He was a guy who did security. He was a guy, and he happened to have lived in the Mavli of Reb Zera. That was Shavuos Reb Zera. Omer lei. Now, whenever you have a guy living amongst you, in order for you to be able to make an Erev Chatzeris, you have to rent his space, like we discussed. So Amar Lei, Reb Zera told the guy, Oiger lon Yeshusach, could you please rent to us your Rishus so that we can make an Erev? Loi Argelu, he said, no, I'm not going to rent it to you. Also, look, Hamed Reb Zera. Oh, I guess the people asked the people in the Erev committee asked the guy to rent the space, and they didn't want to. So they came to Reb Zera and they asked, what should we do? Amar Lei told them, could we rent it? Could we rent the space from his wife? He won't, but maybe his wife will. Rish Lakish said over in the name of a great person, Umanu, who is that great person? Rabbi Chanina. The Ishtay Shal Adam Mareva Shalomidaitoi. The woman, the wife of a goy, could also make an Eruv Shalomidaitoi. So go to his wife and get her to be willing to rent you the space. So again, clearly this is not Choshe Mishpatika Halachas, because if she doesn't own it, how could she rent it out? But for purposes of Eruvin, it works. Hahu Terzina, there was this other security. There's a lot of people in the security business in those days. The Havabishiv of Usay Rabbi Yehuda Bar Oshia. This Terzina lived in the Mavi where Rabbi Yehuda Bar Oshia lived. Amrle, they told him, again, we want to make it there, be so kind, and rent to us your space. Lo Ergelu, who didn't want it. Also, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Oshia, Amrle, can we rent the space from the wife of this guy? Lahava Biyada, he didn't know the answer. Also, Rav Masna, Lahava Biyada, he didn't know. Also, Rabbi Yehuda, Amalahu, he said, Hachi Amar Shmuel, this is what Shmuel said, Ishtei Shalodam, Mareva Shalom. So the wife of a person could even make an Eruv Shalom Yidaita. It was two different stories. Two different stories happened, and they got the same side. Frank the Gemara, is that so? Listen, she's going to have extra pocket money. He'll be happy. She's not going to ask him for money. I don't know. Meisvei. Noshim she'irvu. V'nishtatvu. Shaloi midas baleim. Women who engage in an Eruv without their husband's knowledge, ein Eruv and Eruv, then shiduf and shiduf. So how could you paskin for these communities that they could rely on renting the space from the wife? You see over here that a wife cannot be involved in Eruv and shiduf. So tomorrow, like Hashem, this being by Eden, but if we don't allow a wife's transaction to work for a shiduf, even though she's a Jewish woman, then we shouldn't allow the guy's wife to work for shiduf. Like we're not dealing with actual kinyanim. I guess the Gemara is equating the two. I'm sorry? Right, so that's what Mechi brought up. And there's the Achronim actually being rise from here. If you say Ishka Kugufa by a goy, there's actually a shayla that the Achronim clear if there's a Yid who keeps all the mitzvahs, but he happens to be married to a goita. That's the only thing he doesn't keep. He's married to a goita, and she didn't have proper gerus, but he's a firm guy. So there's a shayla if he's allowed to sell her his chametz, and if she has chametz, if it's called chametz over the Pesach, they actually get into it from this sugya. It's pretty handy to have someone in the house. Like you can tell your wife, "Can you do me a favor? Can you cook me up a coffee?" It's very convenient. Besides the halachic problems, it could be quite convenient. Yeah. So Zok the Gemara, loy kasha. It's not shver. Also had loy asar. If we're in a situation where if this Jewish family does not join in the Eruv, it's going to mess it up for everybody, and nobody will be able to carry. Then we'll accept the contribution of a wife towards an Eruv. But sometimes you could join in an Eruv, but you're not necessarily going to ask her. Why is that? Let's say I live in a chutzner that has a mavi to the right and a mavi to the left. And then on the other side of each mavi, there's another chutzner. So let's say I normally use the chutzner on the left. I normally use the mavi on the left.
You would never use a chutzner to the left.
So if I normally don't use that side, I don't ask her there. So if they wanted to join in an Eruv, even though I wouldn't ask for them because I normally don't use that side, then the wife's contribution wouldn't be good. So the right that it says that the woman cannot make an Eruv, Shalom Midas her husband, that's speaking if the fact that she doesn't join in the Eruv doesn't mess them up and it won't create Isser for them. Because we don't usually use that access, we usually use the other access. But if it's the access that we use, and we're going to cause Isser and mess up the whole culture, the whole Movi, if we don't join the Eruv, then we even accept the Eruv from a wife. And we could even bring a right to that svar. If you don't make this distinction between whether or not we're going to mess up the Eruv or not, kasher the Shmuel, we're going to have a contradiction in Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel said, so the Shmuel that we know says that Ishtoi shall adam ma'areva shel midaita. That's the first statement. The second statement is Echad b'nei Movi sherago lishtatef in b'nei Movi. If there's somebody in the Movi who normally joins in the Eruv with the Bnei Mavi, v'lo nishtatef, and this week he decided he's not going to do that. So the Bnei HaMavi nichnosen l'soich beisoi, v'noitlin shitufan mimenu bal karchoi. They can do it against his will, and the Rishonim tell us it means they can get it from his wife. So you see clearly, you can get it from his wife, but only rogel in she'ein rogeloi. The only time you're allowed to take the Eruv from his wife is if it's rogel, meaning he normally makes an Eruv with them, meaning if he doesn't join in the Eruv, he's going to ask for the Hamavi. So in a case where he's going to ask for the Hamavi, if he doesn't join, then you can take it from his wife. But if it's a place where he wouldn't impact them, it wouldn't ask for them if he doesn't join, you would not be able to take it from his wife. Shemamina. So that's the right. In fact, that this distinction is the proper distinction to make. Lema Masaile. Let's bring a raya. Koif and Oisoi, Lasois, Lechi, V'Karel Mavi. Now, we want to bring a raya that if he's going to mess you up, if it's not done, you force him. So the halacha is you can force him to make a lechi or a kair for a mavi. Meaning, you had a mavi, and you made the shituf, but the last thing that you need is to make the hecker. So everybody in the mavi has to chip in. Everybody has to contribute to the Eruv fund, because everybody benefits from it, and you can force every individual to contribute to those funds. So you see clearly that when it's something that's ma'akiv, you can force everybody to join. So tomorrow, no, you might not have a raya. Shiny hasam, the leka mechitzos. Maybe that's not. Maybe the forcing that brisa is saying has nothing to do with the shiloh Eruv. Maybe it was a security issue. If there's a breach in the fence around the community and the community is at risk because robbers or murderers or terrorists can come in, there you could force each individual to make a kair or a lucky. That's what Rashi learns. Tosfos doesn't like it because he doesn't understand how a kair or a lechi is going to provide any type of security. Rashi must learn that it's lavdavke, it's a big fence. Lishnachrina, another teretz is mitzad shiny. Now this doesn't make any sense, and the Vilna Gaon actually changes the girsa, and let's read the Hagoyis Marav Miranshberg, because he quotes the Gra. Lishnachrina mitzad shiny, zokt Hagoyis Marav Miranshberg. Ayin atze al moigim simen shina and beis of cotton lamed af kufit ches omid beis b'dibra maskul b'zen nearly, and that's going to try to explain what this mitzad shiny means. Udvar v'chaykim emes. I think his words are far from the emes. The hanocha, the right pshat in this gemara is masharisi bazeh bebir hagoyin Rabbi Eliyah Vilna zeichet tzadik v'kadosh l'bracha v'shulchan aruch orchaim simen shin samach zayin. It's also right here on their omid. So he changes the word, not mitzad shiny, bebezdin shiny. So the Gra changes it from the word mitzad to the word bebezdin. You can force anybody in bezdin la'arabi one. So the Shulchan Aruch that says that you're koy for somebody bevezdin, the makor for that is Eruvin daf pei amud beis. The only place it could have been is this top line where it says mitzad, which he changes to bezdin. Lishnachrina bebezdin shiny, right? So the Gra says that the psak of the Shulchan Aruch that says you're koy in bezdin is referring to our Gemara. Correct. V'tas sofer sham beGemara. Shekasav mitzad shiny ayin sham. So the Gra says that this is a printing mistake in our Gemara. V'divrei elikim chayim. The words of the Gaon are divrei elikim chayim. L'fizeh. And tzarich l'mashkasav b'shoyis v'torsham. You don't have to come on to that whole shtickle that the Gaon from Rav Ramshrik said is rochak mea emes. Okay, that's what he says. So bevezdin shiny means when we're talking about forcing a guy to contribute, we don't go and beat the guy up. It means you go to bezdin and you have bezdin extract the money from him legally. Itmar Abchibar Ashi Amar Oisin Lechi Ashera. You're allowed to use an Ashera, which is Osir Bahanoah, to make the Lechi out of. Rab Shimon Lakish Amar Oisin Kair Ashera. You could even make, if you instead of making a Lechi, if you put a beam across the top, you could also make it from an Ashera. What's the difference? A Lechi we learned by a Mobi doesn't have any thickness. It doesn't have to have any thickness, any dimensions. It could be a Mashu. But the koyer we learned has to be thicker and stronger, and it has to be able to support a brick. So Dr. Gemara, Manda Amar koyer, if you hold that you're even allowed to make a koyer, which you need mamoshes to, and you're still allowed to make it out of an ashera. And Rashi says the svara is that since it's boy sreifa, we should say it's kisrufa dami. So if it's like it's burnt, it definitely cannot support any weight. So Mandamar koyer, if you hold you could make a koyer out of Yisur no, kol shkein lechi, for sure you should be able to make a lechi which requires less substance to make. Mandamar lechi, but the Mandamar holds you could only make a lechi out of an ashera, which is Yisur no, avol koyer loy, because ketuse machta shiurei, it's like it's not there. Tosfos asks, if it's not there, so the lechi is just as much not there as the koyer. So Tosfos says something to the effect of ketuse and machta shiurei means it's there, it's just crushed up. So if you have crushed up pieces of wood lining the wall, that would be a good lechi. But crushed up pieces of wood to be a koyer wouldn't be able to support the brick, and therefore it wouldn't be good for the koyer. What happens if you prepared food for the Eruv, and what happened was that the food got used up over time? So the halacha is moisef, you can add to that food, umizaka, and moisef means you can take food from everybody else without them knowing about it. You can go to their farms and take food from them, or you could sponsor and you could be mizake to them. And then tzarich l'idea, if you're taking from them, and if you're taking from them, that's right. If you're taking from them, you don't have to tell them. You can assume that they're maskim because they joined in the first Eruv. Nitoisvu alayim. What if more people moved into the neighborhood and they need to be added to the Eruv? Again, moisef. There, I could go take from those people, or mizake, I could be mizake to them. But the tzorach lady, if I take from them, I'd have to let them know. Rashi says, "L'diyurin toisfu im daitem be'erev." You need to let them know that you're taking for them, and they need to be agreeable to join the erev. They were already in, so you know they're in already. That's correct, exactly. Kamehu shiyuran. You're actually taking their product. You're actually going and taking from them without them knowing. You're going into their kitchen cabinet and you're taking out a challah without them knowing it. So if it's someone who was already part of the Eruv, you know he's agreeable to that because he wants to join the Eruv. But if it's a new guy who moved into the neighborhood, he has to be willing to be part of the Eruv. That's if I'm sponsoring and I'm not going to take from you, I'm going to give you. So then we need a proper kinyan. So I would need somebody to be kinyan on your behalf. So kamahu shiuran, how much food is required for an erev? Zok the Mishnah, b'zman shein merubin, if there's a lot of people involved, mozon shtei sudos l'chulam. It's enough that if you have 2 sudos, the amount of food that would feed them all 2 meals, that would be enough. B'zman shein mu'otin, but if there's not so many people, you need the shear of kegroigos l'chol echad ve'echad. You need the shear of a groigos of bread or food for each person. The Gemara is going to drill down and explain exactly how that works. This is all when you're establishing the Eruv L'Tchila. But if there was already an Eruv and the food was diminished, then kolshu, even a drop is enough. So the way Rashi learns, and if you look at Rashi with the square brackets, Rashi says, Rabbi Yosy polig at Tanakama. Rabbi Yosy is arguing on Tanakama, which means the Tanakama holds that if the food was diminished, you have to replenish it. Rabbi Yosy holds you don't have to replenish. Even if the Eruv was diminished, you don't have to replenish anything. The Eruv with a kolshu would be enough. Really, you don't even need Eruv Chatzeres because once you make Shitufim Avuyos, the whole neighborhood is joined. So Eruv Chatzeres is really redundant. The reason why we do it is Ella Kadei Shelo Lishkach Chesatinoikis. So the little children should remember that there's such a thing as Eruv Chatzeres, where it would be relevant. So Zok Gemara, B'may Askina, this Mishnah that tells us that you're moised from Azaka, what are we referring to? So Rashi says precisely what the halacha we're referring to. B'nismayit ain't tzarich l'idea. It says that if the amount of food was reduced, you're allowed to take from everybody, and you don't even have to tell them. You assume they're maskim. But hakol lagarmi, we could be medayik. The dafka nismayit, you can replenish. But if all the food got used up, and now you have to start over again, then tzarich l'idea and bola arif. So at this point in the Gemara thinks that this is found in the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to change from that. But at this point, the Gemara thinks that there's a difference between if the food was just diminished versus if it was completely used up. So, under what conditions do we say that there should be a difference between if there's some food left or if there's no food left. If you're going to be replenishing the food with the same type of food that the Eruv was originally made with, my Eruvin is smayit, I feel kolonami. If the people were happy to give this food the first time around, then they'll surely be happy to contribute this food the second time around. So why should there be a distinction between nismayit and kola? And it must be that when you're replenishing, you're actually taking some other product from each contributor against his will or without him knowing. So even if there's something left, who said you could replenish it with the other type of food that the person didn't originally give? Zok the Gemara, the Tanya, we learned, if the food got used up from one min, ain't tzarich l'idea, and you're replenishing it with the same food, you don't have to ask the people. But meaning, but if you want to replenish it with something else, then tzarich l'idea. So Zok the Gemara, the Teretz says, we could learn our Mishnah is referring to min echad or shnei min. You could say that our Mishnah is referring to min echad, and then your question is what's the difference? Even if the food got totally used up, you should still be able to replenish it with the same min. So tomorrow you're right. Minus might nismatmate. It doesn't mean, our Mishnah doesn't mean that the food was reduced and I'm replenishing it. The Mishnah means even if all the Eruv got completely used up, min echad, you could still replenish it without notifying the contributors. Or you could say, speaking by shnei min, and by shnei min, if they're still in the middle of the Eruv, there would be a svara to say they'd be willing to sustain an Eruv that they're already invested in. There's a svara to say that they won't mind if you take even a different min. But if there's nothing left and you're starting from scratch, maybe then there would be a svara to make that distinction. From here you see that Chalukan Alof Chaverev al Rabbi Yehuda. You see from here, from our Mishnah, that it does not stem with Rabbi Yehuda. It's not. We learned in a Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said, where do we say this halacha is be'er b'tchumen? Dafka be'er b'tchumen is where you need to get their reshus. Avol be'er b'chatzeres ma'arvin bein ladas bein shaloi ladas. So Rabbi Yehuda holds you only need reshus be'er b'tchumen. You know why? Because be'er b'tchumen, if I make an error for you in one direction, you might have wanted to go into the other direction. So I always need your permission to make for you an Erev Tchumen because we need to make sure you're happy where I'm going to be kind of shvisa for you. But by Erev Chatzeres, where you need to no matter what, there, even Shalom Midas, you could take from the food. So that seems to be inconsistent with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says pretty clearly that to replenish an area you have to have das, to set up an area from scratch you have to have das. So Rav Shita the Chalukin. Why do I need Rav Shizbi to tell me that there's a machlokes between them and our Mishnah? It's pretty obvious. So Dr. Gemara, no. Maybe where did our Mishnah, you might be able to learn our Mishnah, that where did our Mishnah say you need to get permission from each contributor to take their food to contribute to the Eruv? That's if they had a choice of joining Mavi A on their right or Mavi B on their left. So you have to make sure to know which Mavi they want. But if there's only one place where he could join, and if he doesn't join, he's going to mess us up. Maybe our Mishnah would hold that you don't need to ask B'shus. The pshat on our Mishnah is the way we learned, that there's only one chatzar involved here. There's only one Mavi involved here. Nevertheless, you still need to get Rishus from the contributor before you take a contribution from him for the Eruv. And Rabbi Yehuda holds you wouldn't need to only for Eruv Tchum. Kama Hishuri. How much food do you need to start off making an Eruv? So Zok the Gemara, Kama Hu Merubin. The Mishnah says if it's Merubin, it's Mazon Beis Sudos. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, what is a lot of people? Shmoina Esher B'nei Adam. If there's 18 people, you need Mazon Beis Sudos. In fact, the more Shmoina Esher V'suloi, if there's more than 18 people, Mazon Beis Sudos wouldn't work. So the more Ema Mishmoina Esher V'elach. Once you have 18 people, no matter how many you have, but once you have 18 people, it's enough to have 18 Mazon Beis Sudos for each of those 18 people. Even if there's 1,000 people, you still could be Mekel and only have Mazon Beis Sudos for 18 people. You never have to have Mazon Beis Sudos for more than 18 people. So if that's what it means, so what it means basically is very simple. Mazon, the maximum that you'll need for an Eruv is Mazon Beis Sudos for 18 people, no matter how many people there are. But what if there's less than 18 people? Then you don't need Mazon Beis Sudos for 18 people. you only need Muslim Beis Sudois for the amount of people that are there. So why didn't the Mishnah just say it like that? Why did the Mishnah start talking about 18 Sudas and Groigris? The Mishnah should have said very simple. You need Muslim Beis Sudois up to 18. And less than 18, you only need Muslim Beis Sudois for those people involved. And more than 18, you don't have to go further than that. So why did it speak out with the Groigris? The Gemara Amar B'tzak V'Rei Dev Yehuda, the Dinim Mifresh Lo Minei Abba is as follows: Kol She'ilu Machalkoi L'Mazon Shtei Sudois Beinein Vein Magas Groigris L'Chol Echad Ve'echad. Anytime you have enough people that if you try to split it up into 2 sudas for each person, there won't be a Groigris for each one, meaning there's more than 18 people, then Hein Merubin. That's called Merubin. Meaning if you have 18 sudas and you have way more than 18 people, then each person will not get a Groigris. That'll be enough. It's enough for shtei sudas for 18 people. But v'iloi, if you don't have 18 people, then that's called mu'atim. And therefore, each one just needs a share of a Groigris, which is Muslim Beis Sudas for that person. And what the Mishnah is telling us by speaking out this thing with the Groigris is the shtei sudas havion shemoyne esrei Groigris. What it means is it's telling us that it happened. It's telling us a piece of information. How much food is enough food to service 2 meals? A Groigris. So up to 18 people, each person will have 1 Groigris, which means each person will have enough food for 2 sudois. But if there's more than that, then you still don't have to put more food into the Eruv. You can use any type of food, except for water and salt. It has to be a complete kikar, a complete loaf of bread, a complete bilka, a complete bagel. Afilu mafa sa vuprusa, even if you had such a huge bread that's a saw, but it's not complete, it's broken, ein my ravimba. You wouldn't be able to use it for the Eruv. But kikar Israel, if you had a tiny little bilkala, who's shalim, but it's complete, my ravim boy, that you would be able to make an Eruv with. And I guess we could stop here. Shkoyach, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day, and stay far away from earthquakes. Earthquakes.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach.